So I don't think I have all the answers. Let's just set the record straight. But yeah, some of what you have said is very true for all of us. So when Renee first invited me to come and speak, I asked for some time to think about it for two reasons. One, I needed to check my schedule. And the second one was more about this fear of, did I really want to stand up here and present myself as somebody who lived a life in balance? So that's the challenge. So obviously I came to some resolution about that because I'm here. But I'm not a perfect person, and I don't even know if my life is in balance. And probably, no, that's come out a bit wrong, but probably what I would like to offer you tonight is, yes, some tips and tools to use. There's a variety of them. We'll only be able to skim the surface of most of them. We could do whole workshops on a few of them. But I also hope to give you maybe a more spacious perspective or understanding on what balance actually is. So just bear with me and we'll kind of journey through it. And I'm a great believer in me not doing all the talking, but you doing the work. As anybody else who's been to anything I do, that's how you learn. You don't need to hear me talking. It's just by doing and experiencing. So what is balance? That's the first question. You know, what do we think balance is, really? And I wonder if more often we think about balance as what it's not. So you've used some of the words or described some of the symptoms. What other symptoms do you experience or observe from a person or yourself living a life that's not in balance? Feel free. Exhausted. Yep.
Maybe a bit irritable or on edge.
Yep.
More easily.
Mm-hmm. Stress. So they're all common words. We all use them. I'm tired. I'm busy. Busy is the biggest one. But balance isn't always just about being busy. Balance can actually be a life that's not maybe full enough. So we'll just get to that. Let me just make sure. I think we hear a lot, the term that we hear a lot is work-life balance. So that's been touted out for many years. Apparently it came into language in the UK in the 1970s and then in the US in the late 80s. So we usually follow the US. So it's been around for a long time. And generally that means, sorry, I have a cold, so you'll have to bear with me. It's that spillover of work into life. But for me, that's not comprehensive enough, because that's like saying there's work and there's life. And I think the trend now is more towards unpacking, well, what is life for individual people? And so there's more studies now, and they're tending to break it down into smaller components. Things like self-management, time management, stress management, change management, technology management, and leisure management. And you have to manage all of them. So that's so it's much more comprehensive in order to be more holistic. So that's kind of all the theory stuff. But you know, my enduring favourite measuring stick, for want of a better word, when I think about balance in my own life, I read this many, many years ago, and it just remains the key thing I use in terms of reflecting on balance. And I'll give you these shortly, but it's just a quote found in a book by Ruma Godden. There is an Indian proverb or axiom that says that everyone is a house with 4 rooms: a physical, a mental, an emotional, and a spiritual. Most of us tend to live in one room most of the time, but unless we go into every room every day, even if only to keep it aired, we are not a complete person. So that's challenging stuff, and maybe that's as much as you even need to know tonight. If you go away with that, that's a good starting point. So in my preparing for tonight, I read somewhere that balance is the key to wholeness. So I thought about that, and my interpretation of that would be balance is not so much the answer to wholeness. This is my opinion. It's not so much the answer to wholeness, but it's kind of like the key or the entry point into a journey towards wholeness. And that, without doubt, has been my journey around balance. So those times where I feel exhausted or overwhelmed or too much on my plate, or they've always been entry points into a much deeper journey if I was prepared to give them some attention. So we'll move on to that a little bit more later. So when I think about balance personally, balance to me is like a contemporary dancer. So I have a daughter who dances, so it's not unusual that I would make that connection, but it wasn't because I was thinking about Maddie. Contemporary dance, to the observer, can either look weird or like they're not really dancing to the music. It's quite unusual if you've ever watched it. Or to the observer, it can sometimes look incredibly graceful and majestic and in sync, and you can tell the story that they're trying to portray using their body. And a contemporary dancer has their foundations in classical dance technique. So it's like they learn the basic skills first of how to dance, and then as they mature in that, they can kind of free form. And that's I'm sure Sally could give us a much more comprehensive, and Megan, explanation of dance. But they've got their foundation. They know what to do and how the body moves, and then they can kind of expand. And so for me, it's a bit like that. And the other aspect of it is the most beautiful contemporary dancers are the ones where they dance from a place within. It's not just, you can tell there is something about the way they move that they can hear the music, not just the outer music, but it comes from a place from within. And so once again, for me, balance in your life is going to hopefully come from that place. It's not about what observers of your life see and judge in terms, are you living a life in balance or not? It comes from a very inner place. And that's a journey of finding out, well, what from that inner place is truth and what's not truth. So, balance. So for me, I'm a mum and I have 3 daughters. And so when they were all young and in primary school, I got involved in committees and touch shop and, took on a big fake stall thing, trash and treasure. I hate trash and treasure, can I tell you? I am not a junkyard person, but my husband and I were in charge of that for about 5 years. And you know what? Part of that I found overwhelming, stressful, it was busy. And at some point, I realised that being involved in all of those things and filling up my time and running my girls around to all the things that they're involved in, and I'm not saying they're not good things, please hear it for what it is, but at some point I was able to stop and say, well, why am I doing these things? What's the deeper, I was getting angry and resentful, and so those emotions alerted me eventually to, well, what's actually going on? And you know what? It was about self-worth. Did I have any value? If I wasn't busy all the time, I wore busyness as a badge of honour. And most of us do at some point in our lives, and you will notice how we do that. And it can be about being busy about good and holy things too. And so that's why understanding your value is really important. So it's like a checking mechanism all the time about, am I spending my time where God's called me to in the season of life I'm in? So, if you're a mum with young children, well, then you do today what needs to be done today in that field. If you're, a student, well, then you do today what needs to be done in that field. So it's about recognising the energy behind busyness or boredom. What's going on when you're bored? I get bored very easily. So I like to be busy. So when I'm not busy and it causes me a lot of stress and tension, well then I'm learning now to take that stress and tension to God and kind of being open enough to say, well, okay, what do I need to see here? What's really going on beneath the surface? Why do I feel out of balance because I don't have enough in my life? Why do I need more in my life? Does it make me more purposeful? Does it make me more special? And it will be different for everybody. Does that make sense? So, let me just check if I've... So yeah, in my opinion, a life not in balance on paper is not necessarily a life not in balance. So I see balance as something that is unique for each person. So maybe the best way would be an example of my life at the moment. So think of the contemporary dancer again. You as casual observers of my life might say, this woman's life is really out of balance. Me as the one who dances to the music of the Father is trusting that the things that I am doing today are what I've been called to do. So at the beginning of the year, late last year, my family is a family living apart this year. I have a daughter in Melbourne and a husband who's living in Houston at the moment. So our life is very different this year. And at the beginning of the year, I got this unexpected image of what my life might look like this year, and I call it my curious cocktail. So I really did see it as like a martini glass and all the different aspects of my life in it. And one was about travel, because we will travel to see my husband and we'll travel to see Maddie in Melbourne. I'm studying, so that was part of it, and I've gone blank, but there's all these things. Work's just been added to it. Last year we had a huge journey with my youngest daughter, discovering that she was dyslexic, and so we've put in place given that a lot of time and attention, and so being a single mum. So there's just a lot going on. But in all of that, I keep going back to God with it. I like the fact that it looks like it's in a martini glass because it reminds me of the Trinity and the stem being grounded in something. But to other people, so when my mum looks at my life, she goes, oh my God, Karen, you're just too busy. But I know what I value. I know what I've been called to do. And I also know my limits. And I also know my, for want of a better word, darker side. You know, how I can fall into the resentment of busyness and being alone and all of that. Can I tell you, this year, with my husband away, it's been 9 weeks now, not that I'm counting. I have felt so held by God in this time of something so unexpected. It's been amazing. And so that life that looked like it was going to be so out of balance has been an incredible gift. So, anyway, that was random. So, I think it's really important, particularly as women, to know that, to not sit in judgment of another woman's life, to be supportive of the way in which they live their life, and particularly giving women the spaciousness to allow God to speak and reveal truth when things are not quite right. So it's not about telling people that your life's not in balance. It's about giving one another the opportunity and the spaciousness to notice, and then the support and encouragement take that transformational journey with God around that. So, kind of the last thing I would like you to do, or invite you to do, is an exercise that's kind of Ignatian. I think it's called, its official word is composition of place. So I'm going to read you a scripture, and I'm going to ask you to just rest with it, but I would like you to place yourself in the scripture, to actually be in the scripture. Actually, it's the scripture of Bartimaeus, which is also very random when you think about balance. I'm going to ask you to be Bartimaeus. And I'd like you to hear Jesus' words, and in the version that I will read, it talks about the crowd and Jesus walking past. I want you to think about that crowd as your life and what doesn't feel balanced in your life, your busyness or your boredom or whatever it is. So don't see it as people, see it as your life. And just be with that. And hear Jesus ask, what do you want me to do for you? It seemed pretty weird that he would ask a blind man, what do you want me to do for you? Are you brave enough then to respond and say, I want to see. I want to see what in my life that doesn't feel quite right. You know, what is it that you want to touch and bring to my attention, and then go on that journey with him. You okay with that? And then after that, I'd like you to maybe look back over what you've done, write down what you see, and then you go into groups. Do you, Renee? Yep. Right. Okay, so get comfy. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus was sitting beside the road. Just sit and see yourself sitting beside the road and noticing your life. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Be quiet, many of the people yelled at him. Do you have your own many people yelling, be quiet to you? But he only shouted louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, Tell him to come here. So they called the blind man. Cheer up, they said. Come on, he's calling you. Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up and came to Jesus. And Jesus asked, What do you want me to do for you? My rabbi, the blind man said, I want to see. And Jesus said, Go, for your faith has healed you. Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. He asks, he invites. It's up to you to respond. Do you want to see? Healing is on offer for you.